G'day, welcome to the Lifestyle Pioneers. I'm Simon, and this little segment we're going to call Simon Says. Righto, so this is a video I've been meaning to make for quite a while. There's been a fair few people asking me how we managed to tour around the country with our family of 4 in a 20-foot off-road van towed by a Ford Ranger. Is it possible? Can you do it? Stick around, we're going to go through absolutely everything you need to know about vehicles and weight limits and how you make it all work so that you understand it, so that you can make sure that you stay safe, insured and legal. So stick around, we'll go through it all now. This video is for anyone who is touring the country, particularly if you're towing with either a trailer, camper trailer, caravan, anything of the sort, and you want to make sure that you're staying safe and legal. So there's a few things you need to consider when you start looking into this sort of stuff, and I'm not claiming to be any expert or anything like that. This is just my experience and the knowledge that I've gained from hours and hours and hours of research that I did before we bought our caravan and our vehicle. In fact, this research that I did and the information that I'm going to share with you in this video saved us thousands, absolutely thousands of dollars. Trust me, it is much cheaper to make mistakes on paper than it is in the real world. So make sure you watch through this video so that you understand exactly what you need to be taking into consideration when you're shopping for a caravan in particular, or any sort of trailer for that matter, and particularly if you're looking at a new tow vehicle as well. So we originally had a Hilux, a 2012 Hilux, and a camper trailer was our last setup, and that was what we were going to travel the country in. Then we started to think, well, maybe we might want to go a little bit bigger than the camper trailer. We loved our Hilux, it was pretty heavily modified, had a lot of the main accessories that you would want, set up for long range touring. When I started to do the sums on that vehicle though, it started to become obvious very quickly that not only could we not upgrade the camper trailer and stay within our weight limits, we would also have to get rid of the Hilux if we wanted to tow anything, including the camper trailer that we already owned. It was either that or strip off a heap of accessories off the Hilux, and that just wasn't something I was willing to do. So we put the Hilux up for sale, and we put the camper trailer up for sale, and we ended up buying ourselves a zone 20-foot caravan and a Ford Ranger. But it wasn't quite that simple. It didn't all just happen like that. So let's go through first. We'll go and step into my office. Let's go into my office. We'll step inside. I'll go through and quickly explain weights and weight limits and what you need to understand with them. Right, welcome to my office. So what I wanted to do is just go through a little bit about how we came up with selecting the vehicle and caravan combination that we did for what we wanted to do. And just the things that we had to consider as we go through, just to try and help you sort of see the process that we went through and how we made it all work. So what I've done is I've put in the description below this video just an explanation or a definition of all the different terms that you need to get your head around when you start to look at this sort of stuff. So I'm not going to go through all that in this video. There's plenty of stuff out there at the moment where you can learn all that. But yeah, if you're not familiar with that, maybe just pause the video now and just jump down below, check out what those definitions are. And as I'm going through, if I lose you anywhere and you're not quite sure what I'm talking about, just use those definitions to try and help you out. And as always, leave me a comment if you've got any, if there's anything that's still not clear or you want help with anything, just leave me a comment. I'm happy to try and help you out as best as I can, or at least refer you to where you can get more information. So, all right, let's dive in and take a look at our setup, how we figured everything out. Now, Liz has gone ahead and done a beautiful little drawing here of our car and caravan to try and help me demonstrate for you or explain it a little bit better so that we all understand what I'm on about. Righto, so when we first started, like I said, we had a Hilux and a camper trailer, and it became pretty obvious pretty quickly that wasn't going to be suitable for the trip that we had in mind and what we wanted out of our vehicle and caravan or vehicle and trailer combination. Now, we got the opportunity to buy a Ford Ranger second-hand, the one that we've got. It was actually Liz's dad's car, and he was selling it around the same time that we were looking to upgrade our vehicle. So I started to do the sums on, was a Ford Ranger going to be suitable, and was it going to be able to do what we wanted to do with it? Now, the GVM of the Ranger is 3.2 tonnes, so that's the most that it can be. And it's got a towing capacity of 3.5 tonnes, so it can tow an ATM trailer, aggregate trailer mass of 3.5 tonne. Now, the GCM is going to be the limitation with this vehicle, and it is with a lot of vehicles when you really start looking into it, and we'll go into a little bit more detail in that soon. But it really became obvious pretty quickly GCM was going to be our limiting factor. We also had to keep a bit of an eye on GVM, but there was no way we were going to exceed the ATM of the trailer. We would exceed our GCM well before that. So when you start looking at these ratings, it is worth keeping in mind that your GVM, your GCM, and your ATM are all theoretical maximums as well as actual weights. So that's where it can get a little bit confusing. When you start talking about things like for the Ranger, 3.2 ton, that's its maximum GVM. There will also be an actual GVM, which will be the weight of the vehicle itself. Same with the GCM and the ATM. They're theoretical maximums, but you also need to be aware of what the actual weight is. So with our Ranger, I started to do the calculations, and that vehicle, fully loaded with everything we would want to take, and including 140 litres of fuel with the long range fuel tank, the vehicle was going to weigh in at around 2,750 kilos. Now that's with all four of us in it, full of fuel, and with most of our gear that we're going to carry in the Ranger. Now we keep the Ranger pretty light, and you'll see why in a minute, because we had to be able to do what we wanted to do. But it is very achievable. So with the vehicle weighing 2,750 kilos, I had 3,250 kilos of payload left within my GCM, if that makes sense. So my maximum my trailer could weigh with the vehicle at 2,750 kilos was 3,250 kilograms. The other thing I knew from that was that if my trailer weighed that, 3,250, my tow ball weight was going to be around 300 kilos, maybe a bit over. So I knew that at 2,750 kilo vehicle weight, this is without a trailer connected, once I put an extra 300 kilos on there, I was going to be under my GVM by quite a healthy margin. I was going to stay about 150 kilos under it. So I knew straight away that the GVM was going to be okay. And I did some calculations and had a pretty good idea that my rear axle was going to be under as well. That one can be a little bit more difficult to figure out, but you want a little bit of leeway there as well, because I know a lot of vehicles, they can be under all their limits and exceed their rear axle load. So that's one to keep an eye on as well. Now, that meant that I then started looking around at what sort of Caravan we could tow that was going to allow us to be fully loaded and not weigh more than 3,250 kilos. Now, 3,250 kilos would have put us right on our limit, so we really wanted to be about 3.2 tonne in our trailer, fully loaded. Now, when you consider that we wanted to do a lot of off-grid camping and things like that, water is a big part of that, being able to carry a decent amount of water. So we knew already we wanted to carry around about 300 litres of water, if possible. So what I did then is I took the 300 litres of water that I knew I was going to want to carry, that's a known quantity, away from that 3.2 tonne. Remember, I am actually allowed 3,250, but I wanted to keep it under 3.2 tonne. Or maximum 3.2 tonne. So take that away, I've got 2.9 tonne left that I can connect to the back of the Ranger and stay legal. With everything that we were going to want to take away, we had no idea when we first started. We didn't know. We were going to live in the van full time. We had no idea, like, what do your clothes weigh? What does your kitchen stuff weigh? This is sort of difficult stuff to work out, but I knew it was going to be a few hundred kilos at least, okay? Now, there's the Weber, there's a heap of different things that you're going to want to take, particularly when you're living in your van full time. So the most I wanted the trailer to weigh, keeping water up my sleeve, was 2.9 tonne. I knew I was going to want something, Tare couldn't be the Tare of that trailer. Now, when I talk Tare mass, that's what the trailer weighs empty. I really wanted that Tare it was going to have to be around 2.7 tonne at the most, but ideally around 2.5 to 2.6 tonne. Now, the other thing we were facing is that we wanted to be able to travel not only off-grid, but off-road as well. So we started looking at off-road trailers. Now, the problem with off-road caravans and trailers is they tend to weigh a lot more. The chassis are a bit more heavy-duty. There's a bit more involved in the suspension components. They tend to weigh a bit more. They're just generally built a bit more solid, I guess. So they tend to be quite a lot heavier. And we quickly found out there wasn't going to be too many manufacturers out there that were going to be able to build us a family-size bunk off-road van that was going to weigh less than that in our Tare weight. Now, a lot of manufacturers we looked at were going to be 3 tonne or close to it, some more than 3 tonne empty. That was just off the cards for us. There was no way we're going to be able to tow that. And even when I looked at changing out the Ranger to different vehicles, it still wasn't going to be possible. A Land Cruiser 200 can't do it. Any of the other utes can't do it unless you want to go into those highly modified, chopped cruisers or American trucks and things like that. It's just not achievable. Or without doing some serious upgrades. There are I'm not going to say there's no way to do it. There are ways around it if you want to start looking at, doing a pre-rego upgrades and things like that, but you're going to be putting a lot more money into it. Keeping in mind the amount of money I got into a Ranger for, a second-hand Ford Ranger that was 3 years old at the time, was less than half the cost of a new Land Cruiser. So, you know, there's a big consideration to make there. Is it worth me spending nearly more than double the amount of money to be able to carry a few hundred kilos more, or am I better being frugal and, you know, and we're keeping it tight and getting us in under this? And in my opinion, I'm really glad we went this way. Not only did we save a stack of money in that doing that, but the lighter that your rig is, the easier it is just in general. Life is just so much easier on the road, especially when you start heading off-road. At the end of the day, even if your vehicle's rated to carry that weight, you're still only transferring that weight through 4 tyres, and the more weight you're putting on those 4 tyres in your vehicle I'm talking about, the more difficult off-road situations are going to become, the more wear and tear on your vehicle and everything like that. So, look, I'm really happy with the way that we went with things and that we managed to get it, you know, within our 6-ton GCM, and we did. So, how did we actually end up? Well, the Tare of our zone ended up being 2,520 kilos, which we were absolutely stoked with. It was actually a bit less than what Zone were estimating. Zone are pretty good at estimating, and a lot of manufacturers are, at estimating what the likely tear weight of your van, as you specified it, is going to be. Now, that 2,520 Tare includes all of the options and extras that we added. We were very careful and very selective about what options we added, and making sure that we were getting everything that we wanted and that we needed without going overboard and just adding unnecessary, or what I could see as unnecessary, additional weight. Things like second spare tyres I didn't see as necessary, a rear roof ladder. There's a heap of different options that we could have ticked that would have added significant weight to the van, but we were really conscious about keeping that weight down. We've also done the same thing with our Ford Ranger. We've been really selective about what modifications we've done to that to keep that vehicle as light as possible. We don't have a tray and canopy set up. We don't have a dual battery system. We don't have a winch. We don't have a steel bull bar. We don't have side rails. We don't have underbody protection. We don't have a massive draw system in the back. We've kept it really simple, really light, but it works well, and it's extremely capable. It served us really well. The vehicle, as I said, was 2,750 kilos. As I said, the Tare of the Zone was 2,520 kilos. So the total was 5,270. Now, keeping in mind that's with the Ranger loaded, but the Caravan is empty. All right. So now we're going to allow. We spec'd 3 95-litre fresh water tanks on the van. So give or take, I'll just call that 300 kilos. It's just easier, and like I said, I'd rather overestimate. So we're going to add water, which is 300 kilos, 5,570. Now that meant to stay under our GCM of 6 tonne minus the 5,570. Meant that we had 430 kilograms up our sleeve with water on board already, with the Ranger already loaded with tools and spares and recovery gear, kids' bikes, things like that. But with the Caravan empty other than full of water and gas, 430 kilos we had of payload, which is stacks. That's plenty, right? So here's how it actually ended up in the real world. How did we actually make sure that all my theory and everything that I worked out was going to stack up? Well, we went and saw Mark from Way to Tow. Now, Mark's one of these mobile weigh stations. Mark actually travels around the country, but most of these guys, you know, they'll come to you. And Mark was fantastic. He brings out these like their individual weight scales, right? So they can individually weigh every single tyre. They can check your balance front to back, left to right. But most importantly, you're not only going to get your total weights and your tow ball weight and everything like that, but you're going to get your individual axle loads. It's really the only way you can get an accurate understanding of where you're sitting with your individual axle loads and make sure you're not exceeding anything as far as that's concerned. When we met up with Mark, we went through and did a full weigh of the entire rig. And when we did this, we were full of water, full of fuel. The Ranger was pretty well loaded, but we'd only just picked up the van. So we hadn't finished putting everything we were going to put in it yet, but we've had probably half of everything, I suppose, that we wanted to put into it. This is how we ended up. All right. So our GVM, 2,997 out of 3.2 tonne available, left us 203 kilos we could still have in the Ranger. Our GCM, 5,783 out of 6,000 kilos, left us 217 kilos we could have out of our GCM. Our front axle came in at 1,340, which was 140 kilos under its rating, and our rear axle came in at 1,657 kilos, which was 193 kilos under its rating. Now, what's interesting about this is 203 kilos, 217 kilos, 200 kilos, or 193 kilos in the rear axle. What that told us is basically we had 200 kilos up our sleeve, and we could pretty well put it anywhere. I'll show you in a minute that the Caravan's well under as well, but it wouldn't have mattered if we put that 200 kilos in the Ranger. It wouldn't have mattered if we put it, all on the rear axle just about. We would have been under our limits. Now, keeping in mind, I wasn't going to put the full 200 kilos that we had up our sleeve in. So even if we added another 150, 180 kilos, something like that, we were going to stay under all our limits. Something else worth noting here is this front axle rating. We're only 140 kilos under our front axle rating, which might sound like a lot, but you keep in mind that all we've got on the front of our vehicle that isn't standard is an alloy ARB bull bar. So I don't know what they add in weight. I'm guessing it's probably 40 or 50 kilos, something like that. But you add a steel bull bar and some side rails like a lot of people have, a dual battery system under the bonnet and a winch, and you will very quickly find that that front axle rating, you will exceed that pretty quickly. Other thing to keep in mind is with the trailer connected, it's likely the front axle is even heavier without the trailer connected because the tow ball mass of the trailer being connected, or the Caravan, lifts a little bit of weight off the front axle. So it's likely that that's even a little bit higher. All right, so let's have a look at the Caravan at the zone. So it's ATM, 3,011 kilos, and now theoretically it can weigh up to 3.5 ton. So we had 489 kilos up our sleeve there. The tow ball weight was 225 kilos. I'll speak about this in a minute. So we had 125 kilos up our sleeve there. I'll speak about that in a minute. I know you might be thinking that's a bit light, but I'll touch on that in a minute. That tow ball mass gave us a tow ball percentage of 7.47% of the total weight. Now that's pretty light. Probably a little bit lighter than you'd really want it. You want it to be at least probably 8 or 9%. There's a lot of reasons for that, but it's basically just the handling and the way that the whole rig behaves on the road. At the time when we did this weigh, as I said, we still had some extra stuff to bring, things like the Weber and kids' toys and stuff like that we knew was going to all go in the tunnel boot and the front toolbox. So of the extra 150 odd kilos that we added after this weigh was done, 90% of that went in the front tunnel boot and the front toolbox. So a lot of that weight would have transferred to the tow ball. So I haven't actually had it re-weighed since we've been completely loaded, but I'm confident that tow ball mass that was 225 kilos is probably closer to 300 kilos now. So it's definitely over that 8%. It's under the 10%. So I'm in the sweet spot. And the rig, it tows beautifully. It handles really well.
So with that all understood, what is it that really matters and how do you really go about picking a rig and setting it all up? Well, I'll talk about vehicles in a minute, but I think the number one concept, as I said earlier, payload is what really matters. Now, how do you increase your payload? Well, you can either obviously increase your capacities at one end, or at the other end, reduce your tare weight. Now, for us, that was a big reason in choosing the Caravan that we did, was that it had such a large payload and quite a low tare weight. Obviously, with the limitations of the Ranger and the 6-ton GCM, we had to be pretty careful and selective about what we bought and what we decided to hook up behind it. So there was a few things that really were at play there. One was the Caravan we chose, but the other was being very, very careful about what accessories we put on that Caravan, what we optioned it with. Now, if you've seen our walk around videos and our walkthrough videos, you'll see me talking a bit about how we sort of went about the whole thing with two different budgets in mind. One was our obviously financial budget, and the second was our weights budget. Everything that we considered adding or taking with us on the trip, how much was it going to cost us and how much was it going to weigh? And I think it's a really good way to approach it. Now, with the Caravan, we're really happy with how we optioned it up. I think we got it right. I think we got exactly what we needed without being excessive, and we kept the weight really to a minimum. I mean, to build a 20-foot van like what we've got for just over 2.5 ton is pretty incredible, and we wouldn't be able to tow a big off-road van otherwise. Now, with the Ranger as well, if you've seen our other videos, you see that the Ranger's got pretty limited accessories, and that's very intentional, because if I go strap it on, I'd love to have a dual battery system, a winch, a second fridge, a drawer system in the back, maybe even a canopy. I mean, to be honest, I'd love a tray and canopy setup, a touring tray and canopy setup would be fantastic, but I just cannot afford the weight. That's just the compromise that you got to make. But keeping in mind that this vehicle comes in at less than half of what other vehicles that may have had a higher rating are going to cost. So that's a big thing to consider. Yeah, I could have gone and bought a 76 or a 79 Land Cruiser, one of the only vehicles that are available on the Australian market that can tow their full towing capacity at their fully loaded GVM. Not a 200 series Land Cruiser like everyone thinks, although you'd be hard pressed to get one of them now anyway. Not a 300 series cruiser even. You really are limited when you start to look at what can you genuinely tow 3.5 ton with, and you'll quickly find you're going to be up in the realms of either a 76 or a 79 cruiser, which still have their compromises because, you know, let's face it, they're pretty agricultural and basic, and then they don't have a lot of creature comforts. So I often say to people, when it comes to accessorizing and things like that, the most important accessories to fit to your vehicle or to your caravan, and the most important things to take with you are the ones that you don't take with you, and the accessories that you don't fit to your vehicle, because it's really about just selective modifications, selective accessories that aren't going to add significant weight. Now, we're running with an alloy bull bar on the Ranger. Not my preference, I'd rather run steel, but the weight saving was worth it. Apart from that, there's not really too many big weight items that we've added, but we've added what I would consider the essentials for outback touring. So we've got the air compressor, we've got a UHF radio, we've got a second fuel filter. The other big one really is probably the long range tank, and that was a bit of a, you know, do we need it? The thing is, it doesn't weigh that much empty, so if we don't use it all, we don't need to. But I mean, all the weights that I've gone through with the Ranger are with that 140 litre tank chock-a-block full, so you know, it is still possible to keep under our weight limits with that full. So when you are shopping for a vehicle, just really, you know, keep in mind, or if you're trying to find a trailer for your current vehicle, just keep in mind those weights and weight limits. I would really categorise the vehicles that are available on the Australian market today into 3 categories really. You've really got your sort of your smaller wagons and your older utes, I suppose, that didn't necessarily have a full 3.5 ton towing capacity. So they're, you know, like your Prados and your Pajeros and things like that. And then you're going to go up into your full-size four-wheel drives, like your Patrols and your Cruisers. And I'd put in that category as well your dual cab utes and everything like that, because they've got a 3.5 ton towing capacity, but as we've sort of seen, it's not necessarily a full usable 3.5 ton. And then in the third category is your 76 and your 79 Land Cruisers are in there because they can tow a full 3.5 ton at GVM. Apart from that, you're going to be into your big yank trucks, and I'm talking like imported yank trucks, the 2500 and up. The 1500 is really probably not much better than a Land Cruiser, a 200 series Land Cruiser. And then you're going to be into 6-wheel drives and chassis chops and all these heavily modified cars that are going to send you well into the mid 6 figures and beyond. So I'm talking like 150 grand plus before you know, by the time you finish with something like that. So there's a lot to consider there. Is there a perfect tow vehicle in my opinion? Absolutely not. Everything is going to be a compromise. A lot of the Japanese utes and things like that are great touring vehicles, but you are going to be limited with your GCM. The Land Cruiser, great touring vehicle. You're going to run into GCM and GVM problems with those. You're going to have to do some upgrades and spend some money. Yeah, look, I'd love one of these big touring, you know, Chop 200 series or a Yank truck or something like that. But at the end of the day, it's just money, you know. Something like that's going to cost me 3 or 4 times what I got into a Ranger for. So that's a big consideration. That's a big compromise. Everything you look at is going to be a compromise. You've just got to decide what you're willing to compromise on and what you're not. So look, I hope these videos helped you sort of get an idea about how you might go about shopping for a new vehicle or a new caravan or a trailer of any kind, how you can stay safe, how you can stay insured, and how you can stay legal. Because all of this information and the research that I did literally saved us thousands of dollars. We thought we may have had to do a GCM, GVM upgrade on the vehicle. That was going to be our backup plan. We were going to be up for probably 6 or 7 grand to do something like that. So look, you know, doing your research and keeping your modifications to a minimum will save you a stack of money, and it means you don't necessarily need this massive four-wheel drive or this massive touring rig or go and spend $150,000+ on modifying a vehicle. It is possible to do it and still travel in comfort. Hopefully this video has helped you out. Like I said, if you like this video, give us a like. If you want to see what we get up to with our traveling around with our Ford Ranger and with our Zone Caravan, check out some of our traveling videos as we've been adventuring around, and yeah, give us a subscribe and check out the rest of our videos. I'm going to try and do some more of these type of videos. There'll be more of these coming out soon. I'm sorry it's taken me so long to get around to it, but it's done now, it's finished, and thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.